We have oracles, which helps us to collect data, right? We have exchanges such as Uniswap. We have lending platforms such as Aave. But what we don't have in DeFi, and this is really what sets us apart as an ecosystem, is a liquidity aggregator. Well, Steve, what is a liquidity aggregator? It's a central point where you collect liquidity. In traditional finance, nothing goes without liquidity. This is why the first thing that BlackRock did is to open a fund, a liquidity fund. That's the most important. Accumulate liquidity in one place. Once you have accumulated liquidity in one place, now you can start building on top of it. Now you can start having your own stable coin. Now you can start lending and borrowing. Now you can start tokenizing real estate, tokenizing stock. Start building on top of things. But first things first. This is what smart money does already. Another thing is that with ETFs, suck all the liquidity from the blockchains. And this is exactly what these ETFs are for. We shouldn't be happy and clapping and excited about ETFs. It's the downfall of cryptocurrency. It's actually poison. It's nothing good because they're draining all the liquidity and keeping it away from the blockchains. And now, back to what sets us apart is that we seem to be the only ecosystem that understands this, because if more DeFi platforms would understand this dilemma we find ourselves in, don't you think they'll focus on accumulating liquidity and understanding the importance of having liquidity in DeFi? Because if we have liquidity in DeFi, guess what? We already have Bullrun ecosystem. They have deepest liquidity in the space. With every trade, they're accumulating liquidity. They have a staking platform that is scarce. There is no scarce staking platform. They have mechanisms in place that distribute that liquidity to their own tokens that they are actually developing. And they're monopolizing liquidity within their own ecosystem, within their own community. So the more these laws are being implemented, the more restrictions we're experiencing, the more BlackRock is doing what adults should be doing. While the kids are rugging each other, scamming each other, honeypotting each other, adults are busy accumulating liquidity, developing infrastructures, solving real-world problems. And this is why, even though we had 15 years time to get these things done, we are nowhere yet. And this is why it took adults 2 months to get the job done. And here they are again on Ethereum platform. They opened a fund because what will be important on the chain, especially in DeFi, more than anything else, will be liquidity. People will want that. It will be scarce. It will be a scarce commodity. So imagine us with our ecosystem, with our mechanisms in place, going through this bull cycle because the efficiency of our ecosystem. We would have accumulated enough liquidity to be able to sustain ourselves. And with liquidity come volume. And if DeFi doesn't step up and has a platform that aggregates, accumulates liquidity for DeFi protocols like we are doing, this will be the end of DeFi because there's no liquidity. The only way to get liquidity, you have to go through centralized institutions. That's the only way you'll be able to do it. And you'll have to now buy ETFs because if you want to be part of crypto, the only liquid way to get into crypto will be through ETFs. And if you want to buy real estate and all of that, you have to use BlackRock's tokenized versions of things. This is how the 1% is taking over the new digital economy right in front of us. This time we don't talk about 330 years ago coming up with a centralized banking system. No, we are seeing how in real time taking over Bitcoin. They've already done that. Next in line is ETH. Nobody is focusing on aggregating, accumulating, retaining liquidity in DeFi, while adults are putting things in place, while the 1% is putting themselves in order so that it will be business as usual. Why am I telling you all of this? It's because we have something very unique, and we only have to do this right one time, community. We have something that 99.9% of projects don't have. What's the point of having utilities such as an exchange lending platform, oracles, if you don't have liquidity. The future, the survival of DeFi depends on liquidity. This liquidity is a business, is a whole industry. The largest institutions, we looked at this on Thursday, if you remember, is not Apple, Microsoft, and Google, or Tesla, the Magnificent Seven, or Nvidia, or Facebook, Meta. No, it is asset managers, those with deep liquidity. Those are the ones. It's stable coins. Bitcoin doesn't play a major role in the space. It's stable coins that play a major role in the space. So what we're doing here, what we have here, is not just for us as a community. What we have here plays a major role for the crypto industry as a whole, for DeFi as a whole. And once we do this right, community, and we manage to go through this once-in-a-lifetime liquidity rush, and we manage to accumulate as much liquidity as possible, and we accumulate as many USDC as possible, get the volume going consistently, we will be the only DeFi platform that won't be bothered with all these restrictions, because we'll have an ecosystem running within our own community, within our own ecosystem. We won't be needing all these on-off ramps from centralized institutions. We won't have to worry about being delisted from Binance or Coinbase because we were listed there in a centralized institutions. We'll be able to be self-sufficient by having our own liquidity within our own ecosystem. We'll be launching our own tokens and feeding these tokens that we launch with our own liquidity that we are getting from our own whale, so to speak, within the Bullrun ecosystem that is on a platform level that we just discussed at the beginning of the session. This is why we're not selling Bullrun. We're just accumulating it. And the more we accumulate, the more USDC we'll get. And the more USDC we get, the more liquidity will be circulating within our own ecosystem. So not only BRL will survive, but we'll be able to feed Survivor and feed Killer Whale also. And this is how we'll be self-sufficient and won't have to worry about these regulations that are being put in place, because we are the only DeFi protocol ecosystem that is focusing on retaining liquidity. So anytime anybody needs liquidity, they'll have to join us, our community, because we will not be taking in other tokens. We don't know them. They might rug our community. They might honeypot us. We develop our own tokens and give them our own liquidity and educate ourselves and build a global decentralized community amongst ourselves that is self-sufficient, sustainable, stable. You get the picture. So there's two ways how this can end. One, we do this right. We accumulate the deepest liquidity in the industry, the highest volume in the industry. We bund the most tokens in the industry. We give the highest staking distributions in the industry. And we have the highest priced token in the industry. And we flip everything in our way in DeFi. So everybody in DeFi that wants to be part of liquidity and a community that is self-sufficient, what other options do they have? They have to come to Bullrun, because Bullrun was thinking ahead of time and already developed an ecosystem that is focusing on liquidity retention and is not relying on BlackRock for liquidity, or is not relying on ETFs for liquidity. But we have our own liquidity in DeFi. The only way you'll be able to get into crypto is through ETFs, and ETFs will be controlled by BlackRock. Anytime you want to buy real estate, it will be tokenized. This is why we have something that is very unique and that will literally set us apart. And while these projects will be drained from liquidity because they're heavily reliant on centralized exchanges, we'll be self-sufficient because we are retaining our own liquidity and keeping it within our own ecosystem and build mechanisms in place that will keep feeding liquidity to not just us through USDC distributions, but especially our tokens that we'll be launching. Why would we need centralized exchanges or to be listed on these if we have our own liquidity and our own volume? Isn't that why every token wants to be listed on centralized exchanges? For liquidity and volume. That's the reason why. So centralized exchanges will be irrelevant. This is good because now we can at least point at something as an example, because as humans, sometimes it's easier for us to understand things if we can point at an example. It makes it easier for us to understand. So now, at least with adults in the room, being BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK Invest, and Wall Street smart money in the room, we can now point and see, you see, this is exactly how it's supposed to be done. We need aggregator, liquidity aggregator. We don't have that in DeFi. We don't have a platform that is strictly developed to accumulate liquidity. We don't have any. In traditional world, there's so many. And the ones that are accumulating liquidity, they're the largest in the industry. Those are the BlackRocks. Those are the Fidelities. Those are the ARK Invest. Those are all of these asset managers. They are the liquidity aggregators. And they're the largest institutions that are controlling trillions of dollars. But we don't have that in DeFi. So instead of wanting to be the next SHIB, the next Aave, the next Uniswap, we want to be the first liquidity aggregator in DeFi. There is no one out there focusing on that besides us. This is what sets us apart, community. And this is what will really put us in a space where it's like a survival of the fittest now. Only those with liquidity will survive. If you don't have liquidity, bad luck. You won't make it because the regulations, people will rather go with BlackRock. They have already a lot of clients. They have a reputation. They're regulated. So all the smart money and big money, institutional money, whales money will not go to centralized exchanges. They will all go to BlackRock, right? And they will have control over the entire money supply in DeFi and on the blockchain. They're already on Ethereum and they're already running ETFs on Bitcoin. Next is Ethereum, and then Solana, and then Chainlink, and so on and so forth. So I believe by now we all understand why we always stressing on liquidity, why we always say that it's not market cap that is important. Look at the liquidity and look at an ecosystem that retains it. Let's end this on a high note. I can't express how much liquidity is about to enter this space. The way I see everything being lined up by these institutions, led by JP Morgans and Goldman Sachs and Fidelities and the BlackRocks, the way they're setting everything up, preparing with liquidity funds and ETFs and all of that and tokenizing everything, this is how they take control over the money supply, over liquidity. And once they do that, sad to say it will be game over. We'll be entrapped again. And we had a small window to free ourselves through this new digital economy. But those who are not focusing on retaining liquidity, if you're not part of an ecosystem that is literally developed, specifically customized, efficiently to retain liquidity, after this bull cycle, not every cycle do you get to be part of a new digital economy. And the beautiful thing is that this is still an emerging market, meaning there's still so much room for growth. We are still at the beginning stages. One thing I have to highlight, just the ETF industry alone is 300 trillion deep. And all of that is about to enter the blockchain, specifically Ethereum, the same blockchain we are on. So even if it's just 10%, that's 30 trillion that is about to enter the space. The entire market cap right now is 2.5 trillion. So there's still so much room for growth, and that's how much liquidity is about to enter. And all those real world assets, they'll need liquidity. They'll have to be paired with liquidity. So this just shows you how much liquidity is about to come into this space. And if 24 million individuals were able to retire last bull cycle in the US alone, and we already surpassed last bull run cycles, or we're matching last bull run cycles all-time high already now, and we still have at least 12 to 15 months still ahead of us until we hit the peak of the bull cycle. That just shows you how much liquidity we are about to get flooded with, and how we are fortunate to be part of this ecosystem early on that is going to retain all the liquidity possible. And after the music stops and the bear market starts again, and 99.9% of the projects, especially these community tokens and even real established blue chip tokens, will dry out. And the only way to invest in crypto will be through ETFs or through BlackRock's Build liquidity fund, period. So this is why we take this serious. We have to do this only once. And once we do this right, though, we'll be the DeFi liquidity aggregator. And liquidity will be rushing through us. And this will set us apart. And everybody needing liquidity within DeFi will have to join our ecosystem, will have to be part of us. And this is why it's vital that we do this thing the right way. By that time, we've already accumulated all the liquidity we need to be self-sustained, have consistent volume, and keep this positive feedback loop going and grow as a community. I believe the moment the masses understand what's going on and they want to hold on to their cold wallets, be self-custodian, be their own banks, they won't have many options, community. Actually, they won't have any options at all. Because as we speak, there is no DeFi ecosystem that is focusing specifically on retaining liquidity. Eventually, people will understand and get the picture, and we'll see what's coming. Not all of us have to be visionaries and be able to see the future, see things before they happen, but at least the rest of us should be able to assist in bringing awareness to that by participating like you are today. That was the message for today. It's supposed to encourage us that we're on the right track, that we are on the right platform, and was just highlighting the future, what's coming, the laws, the regulations that are in place, passed already in Europe. Next thing will be passed in Asia, in the US, Canada, in Africa. It will be passed everywhere. It will be a common law now. So as the 1% is creating their own private liquidity fund on Ethereum, they are limiting the 99% from participating on the chain. So this just shows you the liquidity fund is not meant for the 99%. And that's the whole plan. That's the idea, that the 1% will keep dominating business as usual. But we can address that by doing what we're doing, bringing awareness to liquidity, and hopefully having other DeFi platforms realize this and start accumulating liquidity as well. They should bring tokens that are actually retaining liquidity and are sustainable, are deflationary, are scarce, and are actually adding value into the space. Wall Street is not here to play nice. They're here to take our lunch. They're here to take our freedom, our independence, our self-custody, denying us from participating in this wealth distributing event. So that's the message for today, community. And I hope this was informational, educational, and inspirational to us as we can look forward to the future, because we have a platform that is focusing on what is needed, what would be valuable for the future, especially in DeFi. And let me close with this. Everything that goes up will come down. After a bull cycle, always comes a bear cycle. And what that does is it's triggered by liquidity. Liquidity in abundance triggers the bull cycle. Lack of liquidity triggers a bear cycle. Usually during a bear market, including Bitcoin, after the last bull run, Bitcoin lost 80% of its liquidity, and others up to 99% of the liquidity. So they'll be all drained of liquidity. So this is why we stress on doing things the right way once. We only have to do it the right way once and retain as much liquidity as possible, so that once the music stops, our engine will be just warmed up. And by that time, when mainstream starts to understand what's happening and people start to see what Wall Street has been organizing the last 2 months and putting in place, they'll start looking for DeFi solutions. And let's be the choice. Let's be that choice. And that's the message for today, community.